Hi, everyone. This is Suzanne Simon with Restore America's Estuaries. We're still waiting for folks to come on, and once we do, we will get everything going. Stand by. Hi, everyone. This is Suzanne Simon with Restore America's Estuaries. We still have a couple more people signing on, so we'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll get going. All right, since it's a few minutes after the hour and I value everybody's time, we're going to go ahead and get going. So thank you very much for joining us today for the Living Shorelines Community of Practice webinar on Realtor Outreach and Trainings. On behalf of our presenters and all the staff here at Restore America's Estuaries, I would like to thank you for joining us. I think a lot of you who have joined know who I am, but this is Suzanne Simon with Restore America's Estuaries, obviously. I'm the Strategic Programs Manager, and I am the lead for the Living Shorelines program. A few quick announcements to start off. First, sound quality. All participants will be in listen-only mode. If you are having any issues or technical problems, you can press *0. Also, resources will be available following this session. We'll be recording this session. Both the the recording will be posted, and we'll let you know when that happens. As per our typical gatherings, there will be a quick national update, quick regional updates, and then our featured presentation will be by Whitney Jenkins of the North Carolina NEAR. For any comments, questions, and updates, please put your hand up virtually, and I will unmute you one by one, and that will let us have a bit more interactivity and a conversation. I think that's it, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you have any questions while this is going on, you can use the question function, and that will come to me, and I can hopefully answer any questions that you may have. So with that, for those of you who aren't familiar with Restore America's Estuaries, we are a national organization with alliance members, 10 alliance members around the country. You can see that here, along with our mission statement. So as I already reviewed, but here is the agenda. We'll be doing some quick national updates, regional updates, and then Whitney's presentation, followed by a Q&A session. So in terms of national updates, from what I'm hearing, the biggest thing that's going on is people are just trying to figure out what this administration is going to be doing with respect to coastal issues and the appropriations. It's still very much up in the air, so I think everybody is just in a holding pattern. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to get out of this, assuming my computer works with me here, for just a second. And let's see, does anybody, let's start up in the Pacific Southwest. Marilyn, I am going to unmute you, and I'm going to see if you have any updates. Marilyn?
Hi, Suzanne. You're so great calling on me when I haven't prepared or thought about it. Let's see if there's anything of major note to share with the group. You know, nothing's popping up. There's a lot of climate planning, living shorelines planning. I guess one to mention is a June 2017 Living Shorelines Workshop that's being held in Southern California and planned with the Coastal Conservancy and then the Southern California Climate Project. So happy to send info on that, but nothing else is rising up right now.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Marilyn, and thank you for being my willing guinea pig, or maybe unwilling guinea pig, as
no problem.
Okay, so I'm going to be going, I guess I should give people the heads up. I'm going to be going, let's see, which way is that? Counterclockwise around the country. So Gulf Coast people, you're up next. So Marilyn, I'm going to mute you. And Leeanne, you're up. You go.
Wait, who's going?
Leeanne, that would be you.
Okay, there was a blip, and I wasn't sure if I heard my name. You needed a volunteer.
Yeah, that's Leeanne Wilde with the Galveston Bay Foundation, for those of you who have any doubt who Leeanne is. So go for it.
Well, you seemed to need, someone to give it a kick. So here we go. Not that I have much to say, but I am working, and this might be of interest to some folks, is the reason I raised my virtual hand. I am working with Chris Boyd at Troy University, along with lovely folks from BIMS, from Florida, from Alabama, too many to mention individually and organizationally, but we are putting together a grant proposal that would fall under the NOAA Restore Act Science Program to build on a living shoreline suitability model that VIMS has already put in place up in their region in Virginia. And we are trying to expand it to cover sections of Florida, Alabama, and the Galveston Bay in Texas. So we haven't been awarded it yet. So this is not, let's all not get too excited. No, but if it comes through, it could be a very interesting tool to use to help potential regulators help get on board with living shorelines selection sites, or deciding whether to permit or not permit a particular site. In some cases, landowners themselves might want to use it to determine whether a living shoreline would be suitable in their region. It's all very vague and up in the air at this point, but it is kind of out there on the potential horizon. And so I wanted to mention it in case anybody on the call is interested and wants more information as this unfolds, or in case anybody has any brilliant comments or questions or information they would love to feed to me as we work through this process. So that's my update.
Great, thank you, fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to mute you now.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, other folks in the Gulf. I don't see other Gulf folks right now. So Casey Jacobs, who is representing, I think, the Caribbean at this point. Casey, it's nice to hear you or see you virtually.
Yeah, I love you guys too. Good afternoon. So I just have a quick, so I'm Casey Jacobs. I'm Partnership and Communications Coordinator with the Caribbean Landscape Conservation Cooperative. And as part of our cooperative, we have a dune stabilization and restoration conservation action team. They're prioritizing beaches through spatial analysis for all of Puerto Rico to see what are candidate beaches for either dune creation or for restoration and stabilization. But more excitingly, they are working in the metro area in San Juan and then a municipality of Carolina, together that makes up the metro area, to do a series of demonstration sites. Started off as one, and then through funding through the San Juan Bay Estuary program and then local, the Knights of Columbus, Caballeros de Colón, are interested. They have an eroding beach right in Carolina, and so they're interested in serving as a host. And then other local partners also were able to put together resources and in-kind contributions. So it actually turns out we'll be doing 3 demonstration sites to kind of launch the team's physical work, not just the spatial analysis. And so we're really excited. They've already started identifying the areas and kind of doing sketches of what it'll look like, and they've already got a series of nurseries that they're working with to make sure that they've got the plants that are needed, and they'll be working with the communities through an educational program to help them not only so that the community members not only help in the design process but also in the plantings and then in the monitoring and kind of protection, making sure that, you know, especially on busy weekends, that no one's trampling the sites. So we're really excited. I don't have any details right now because we're still in the beginning stages, but more to come.
Fantastic. Thank you, Casey. That's very exciting. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. Moving up the coast, let's go to the southeast. We've got a couple of people, but no one is holding up their hand. So I will assume then that you don't have any updates. And then let's see, Great Lakes, Pacific Northwest. All right, no one's holding up their hand. So I'm assuming then that we have no updates. And I also realized belatedly perhaps that I may have overlooked, by calling on Maryland, I may have overlooked some of our other West Coast folks. So if you have any, if you're on the West Coast and you have any updates, just quick, put up your virtual hand. All right, seeing none. Okay, so we are now going to shift our focus, and I would like to introduce Whitney Jenkins with the North Carolina National Estuarine Research Reserve. She's been doing some fantastic work on outreach and trainings, and in particular with the Realtor community. So with that, Whitney, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right, I'm going to give you the screen. Here we go.
All right, can you see it?
Yes, it looks great.
Excellent.
Take it away.
All right, hi, great. Thanks so much, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Jenkins. I'm the Coastal Training Program Coordinator with the North Carolina Coastal Reserve and National Estuarine Research Reserve. And I also am going to throw in a little bit of information about a marine contractor events that we just did, in addition to information about our Realtor Workshops. So I just want to make sure everyone's familiar with the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. We're a network of 29 sites across the United States and in Puerto Rico. And we also have our newest site, which is not on this map, is Hawaii. And I'm really hoping that we have our next annual meeting out there. But it's a really great network. And a lot of these reserve sites are working on living shoreline issues. And most of them also have the Coastal Training Program Coordinator, which is my position. So all of these reserves, we have a federal partner, which is NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and we all have a different local state partner. So in North Carolina, our partner is our coastal program, the North Carolina Division of Coastal Management. And we sort of have 2 parts to our program. It's the Coastal Reserve and the National Estuarine Research Reserve. And that is distinguished by our reserve sites. So we have 10 sites. 4 of our sites are federally designated as a reserve, the National Estuarine Research Reserve. So those include Masonboro and Zeke's Island down in the Wilmington area, the Rachel Carson Reserve, where I'm located. I can see the reserve right out my window. It's a beautiful day here. And then the Currituck Banks Reserve, which is up near Corolla. And then when the National Estuarine Research Reserve was established, they added 6 more, the state added 6 more sites into our program. So those include Kitty Hawk Woods, Buck Ridge Reserve, which is our largest site at about 28,000 acres, Buxton Woods, Bermuda Island, Bald Head Woods, and Bird Island, which is on the South Carolina border. And overall, we protect about 42,000 acres, And we consider our sites to be outdoor classrooms and living laboratories. And our mission is to promote informed management and stewardship of North Carolina's estuarine and coastal habitats through research, education, and example. And so all of our programs, research, stewardship, education, and training are all integrated and work together. And then on our sites, we also allow compatible traditional use. And by that, I mean clamming, beachcombing, kayaking, paddleboarding, all of those typical sort of coastal recreational activities. So I want to tell you a little bit about our Realtor Workshops. Since 2002, which is when I started here, we've offered a variety of workshops. And right now we're focusing on low impact development for water quality protection, living on a barrier island, which is talks about barrier island development and also protecting native dune vegetation. And of course, promoting living shorelines for erosion control, which is what we're talking about today. Hopefully you saw this article that Suzanne sent out in the reminder email about the workshop. This was in Coastal Services magazine and is a great overview of our Realtor Workshops. We find that realtors are enthusiastic about our events because they're very different from the typical continuing education event they're required to attend. Also, there are many people relocating to the North Carolina coast, and we hope that the messages about coastal resource protection that we're providing to the realtors trickles down to these newcomers. So realtors receive 4 elective continuing education credits from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission for attending a half-day workshop. And realtors are required to get 8 elective credits of continuing education every year to maintain their licenses. And that's on top of other courses they might have to take, like an ethics class or broker in charge. The workshops have to be approved by the Real Estate Commission to be considered as continuing education courses. And we have to renew the courses every year with the commission. Because we are a state agency, the Real Estate Commission does not charge us to approve, renew, or offer credits to real estate agents. So we're able to offer these courses at no cost to participants. And normally a realtor would pay, $50 or more for a continuing education course. So this is definitely a carrot to get them to our classes. For our Living Shoreline workshops, we try to include field visits to living shorelines as part of the workshop. And here in this picture, you can see Tracy Scribble with the North Carolina Coastal Federation, and she's showing participants how to use a dibble bar to plant Spartina alterniflora or salt marsh cordgrass. Living Shoreline workshop content is presented by local experts at the workshop, including those from the North Carolina Coastal Federation, the Division of Coastal Management, NOAA, North Carolina Sea Grant, and the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnership. And in this picture, you can see Carolyn Curran. She is with the NOAA Beaufort Lab, and she's telling everyone about the loose shell and marsh plant living shorelines that she helped create on Pivers Island, which is where my office is located and the NOAA Beaufort Lab is located. So workshop content includes ecological reasons for using a living shoreline, overview of living shoreline designs, the permitting process, case studies, and best practices for construction and for working with marsh plants and oyster shells. So we do post workshop evaluations for all of our workshops, and I'd just like to share a few quotes with you from these evaluations. This one is, I learned that living shorelines are a tool to protect coastal properties while preserving valuable habitat. All the speakers were fantastic and the material covered was perfect. Extremely happy I found this workshop. And this one, as a realtor, I'm constantly dealing with the properties on marsh and water. So this workshop will help me serve my clients better, help them make informed decisions, and provide them with possible options. We'll also be doing a follow-up evaluation in the near future to see if real estate agents are using this information and guiding homeowners towards a living shoreline instead of a bulkhead. And this is so we can gauge the long-term impact of these events and also learn where we can focus our future events. So then I also want to talk a little bit about our marine contractor outreach. We found over the years we aren't getting many marine contractors to our more technical living shoreline workshops. Some of the reasons might be that they don't need continuing education credits. They're the type of profession where if you're not out working in the field, you're not getting paid. And this may also be an audience that isn't used to going to a training or a classroom type activity. so we try to think out of the box a little bit here, and we came up with the idea of dinner and a living shoreline movie. So how we crafted the movie was, in 2015, we hosted 3 technical living shoreline workshops, and we recorded the workshops that we hosted in Beaufort and Columbia. We chose Beaufort and Columbia because they represent different salinity regimes. Beaufort is salty and can support oysters, while Columbia and the northern coast is a freshwater environment and supports a different type of marsh plant. So we wanted the diversity of North Carolina's shorelines represented in the movie. So all of the workshop videos are available on our YouTube channel, and I can give you the link to this or provide it to Suzanne to share with you later. So then we took the workshop footage and edited it down into a 50-minute movie. And it was quite an undertaking to take about 10 hours or so of workshop presentations and edit it down into 50 minutes and make sure it was a cohesive and complete piece. Then we invited marine contractors and other audiences to eat dinner with us and watch the movie. So we hosted 3 events, and these just happened in February and March of this year. We had the events in the southern, central, and northern regions of the coast. The events were hosted at a local restaurant and in auditoriums, and we provided the dinner. The event started at 5:30 and were scheduled until 7:30 p.m., so we had time after we watched the movie for questions and discussion. We reached 54 people total, and there were 22 different construction and engineering firms represented at the 3 events. So the movie does not include permitting information, since that's an evolving topic here in North Carolina, but the Division of Coastal Management field representatives attended each event and provided permitting information and helped me answer questions. And this picture was taken at the Wilmington event that we held at a restaurant. And it was kind of fun because people bought themselves beer and other alcoholic drinks. So that's definitely a perk of having something like this at a restaurant. So I just wanted to share a little bit of feedback from the evaluations from the dinner and the movie. I feel overall they were well received, and we received positive feedback. Everyone who completed the evaluation agreed or strongly agreed that the attending was a good use of their time. And the majority of participants also stated that they learned something new that they would apply in their work. So I thought that was a pretty good result as well. So with that, I thank you for your attention. And I do have experience with a dibble bar. This is us planing Spartina on a loose oyster shell reef living shoreline on the Rachel Carson Reserve. So I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Whitney. I love ending with an action shot. That's always
good. Yeah.
I like it.
I know what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
You look like you do at the very least. So that's 9/10 of the convincing. So I have a number of questions for you, but I would love for some of the folks who are on the webinar, if you have a question, please raise your hand virtually, and we can take some of those Q&A. So, and I will kick this off while I wait for people to put up their hands. What was the biggest lesson that you learned, perhaps besides holding in a restaurant that has a liquor license? So what would you recommend if people were trying to, let's start with the realtor, because I imagine the realtor trainings and the contractor trainings were a little bit different because they're different audiences, but what were some of the biggest lessons learned, in working through these?
Let's see. Well, I just find that the realtors are a really great audience. This topic is so different from what they're normally dealing with that they're sort of excited to learn something new. And I think they also learn something new that's in their backyard, because I've had many realtors go, oh my gosh, I have marsh in my backyard and I had no idea what was living back in there. And I think I'm going to use oyster shells and see how that goes. And it's just a great audience, so I wouldn't feel intimidated by them. I also feel that they're more of a lay audience, and so generally with them, I usually give the science presentation because I have enough information about the science and living shorelines and marshes that I can provide that. But if I was going to use a more technical audience, I certainly would call in one of my favorite scientists to come and talk about the ecology and the ecosystem services and be sure that those more technical questions are answered.
Okay, great. And then how many, and if you mentioned this, I apologize if I missed it, but how many realtor workshops and how many realtors did you ultimately reach, approximately?
Well, we have been doing these realtor workshops since 2002. So I didn't go back and count how many, but in 2015, we did 3 Living Shoreline workshops for realtors. And then just this past March, we did another workshop for realtors on Living Shorelines. And then coming up later this month, we're doing a low impact development workshop for realtors. So it's one of our core offerings and one of our core audiences. And so we just sort of rotate them throughout the year. Another valuable lesson for me was partnering with local realtor associations. So many of the counties in North Carolina have realtor associations, and the realtors become members of these associations, and these associations are looking for training opportunities that they can offer their members as a perk of being a member. And so through partnering with them, they do all the advertising, they get all the people there, they've got the room, they can get someone to sponsor snacks. So all I have to do is show up with my computer and my presenters, and we do the workshop. And so it's, and also, like I mentioned before, because we're a state agency and we don't have to pay the commission, the real estate commission, any money to offer the workshops, it's a win for the Realtor Association because we're able to offer the credits at no cost. And so it's not costing the Realtor Association that cost, because normally they're paying to renew the course, to offer the course, and also $10 per person to offer the 4 hours of credit. So it's kind of a win-win and a really great partnership. And so every so often, the Brunswick County Association or the Carteret County Association of Realtors will call me up and be like, we want to do this workshop. What works for you? And so it's definitely a win-win.
Wow, so you're actually having the realtors calling you and saying, we want you to come back, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. So do you have repeat attendees sometimes, or like once, is it usually just once and done?
Oh, it's repeat, definitely. And I get, so they're on my regular listserv. So when I send out a workshop that's about something else, I'll get 10 emails going, are Realtor Credits on this one? I'm like, no, sorry, we'll have something soon. So they're definitely tracking on it. And I definitely have a Realtor fan club, which is kind of funny.
Well, that's always good. Okay, so we did have someone submit a question. Let's see, and the question is, how did the initial conversations go with the realtor associations to convince them to make the workshops for credits? Were they on board immediately after hearing the idea, or did they need more convincing? And I'm assuming that's a question from Casey, that it was the you had to appeal to the state. Is that correct? To say, right, yeah, that this is worth credit. Can you go through that process in terms of how you, I guess, convince them or approach them, or however you want to put it?
Absolutely. So when I started back in 2002, we already had a partnership with our cooperative extension, and they had a course on septic systems, which is another great course for realtors, like septic system maintenance and how septic systems work. And so when I came on board, we sort of already had this connection, and that's how I learned about the process. So what the Real Estate Commission does is they approve a course. So I had to submit course materials that included like objectives, outline of what you're going to accomplish, any related resources, the biographies of your speakers, and then also sort of a narrative. And what I used for a narrative were just PowerPoint presentations with the notes pages filled out. And so you have to submit to the Real Estate Commission this package, this application to offer a course. I've never had any problems with them approving my courses. And as far as I can tell, there really aren't any other agencies or private companies who are offering realtors workshops on environmental issues. There's a lot of businesses that offer these realtor courses, and you can find them like in the commission directory. They're continuing education providers, and it's their business. And so it's just, you complete an application, and then every year I renew. And again, because we're a state agency, I don't have to pay to renew. And then sometimes they want updated course materials every year if it's been a while. Some of these workshops I've had approved for 10 years or more.
Wow. And do you happen to know what the fee is for somebody who is not a state agency? Because I know there's a number of people from nonprofits I'm seeing on our attendee list. So do you happen to know what that is?
Well, it's going to vary by state, definitely. And your state might have, or territory might have, a different process for how to get your course approved. But I think it would be several $100s to get your course approved. For us, it would be $50 a year to renew each course. So I have 3 courses, so it would be $150 to renew those 3. And then to offer the course, it's $10 per person to give them the credits. But I would think you might have an exception as a nonprofit to also be exempt from that.
Interesting. Okay, because I know it's similar in some ways to any field that requires continuing education credits, whether it's engineering or lawyers or whatever. There's individual boards for those, and you're right.
Exactly.
Because we've looked into it for our summits, because people keep saying, well, we would love CEUs or CPHs depending on what field, or teachers. And every time we would, because we have it in a different state each time, we have to register with that state as an approved provider. And again, it starts to get prohibitively expensive, except unless we were to work with a local partner. Okay,
and you might want to consider working with your local research reserves, because all of the coastal training programs in the country have approval to offer American Institute of Certified Planners credits at no cost to us. So that's a partnership opportunity. And then, you know, I have connections with certified floodplain managers and landscape architects and engineers to offer them all credits as well. And I'm sure other local coastal training programs would have that connection.
Great. Good to know. Good stuff. Okay, and now we got another question that came in, and it is similar to a question that I had already written down. So the direct question was, is there any follow-up with the marine contractors that attend to know if they are now increasing implementation of on-the-ground projects, living shorelines projects? And I was having a similar question, which my notes were, how are you gauging the on-the-ground changes? Because that's always tricky, right? So are you doing any follow-up with, for example, the contractors, the realtors, to really gauge perhaps or maybe make a causal link, for lack of a better description, between your trainings and whether that's really resulting in on-the-ground?
Sure.
Projects?
Yeah. Well, I showed you that map earlier of North Carolina and how huge our coast is, and that our program goes from the Virginia border to the South Carolina border. And because we're part of our coastal program that provides services to North Carolina's 20 coastal counties, I consider that the whole coastal region to be my target area, and it's huge. And I'm only one person. And so it is very challenging to see direct outcomes from trainings. That's one reason why we're going to do the post workshop evaluation, to get at those mid and long-term outcomes with the realtors and how they're using the information. We haven't gotten there yet with the marine contractors. This is sort of our first attempt to really focus on marine contractors, and we just wanted to see how it would go. Because like I said, they're a really difficult audience to get into a classroom. But I am starting to see anecdotal evidence. Like I've just been talking with a marine contractor and an engineer up in Kill Devil Hills who is got a proposal in the permitting process, wants me to come to the scoping meeting and give a presentation to the homeowners association where the living shoreline will be put in. So I'm seeing more of that. I had another person in the Wilmington area who attended one of the dinner and a movie. He is actually the president of a homeowners association and wants to get advice on a living shoreline for their property. So right now it's all anecdotal. We do have a living shoreline work group that is internal to our division, and we're constantly talking about, okay, what's next for outreach? Okay, what's next for the permitting? What's next for research? And we're all talking together and combining that together. So we're definitely working on next steps. I'm trying to think if there's anything else related to that. I don't think so, but if it comes to me, I'll say it.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, homeowners association, I realize this is a little bit beyond the scope of what we had just talked about, but in talking with other folks in this general community of practice, I'm hearing HOAs coming up over and over and over again, because depending on where you are, like I used to live in Florida, so HOAs are huge. They're really important. They control a lot of the shared property. Are you noticing an uptick in HOA enthusiasm for this and interest, and if so, what are your next steps with relation to that particular sector or group of people?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our most challenging audiences to get at is the property owner. It's just very difficult to get to the property owners. And then the other issue, too, is that I think in some respects, the demand for a living shoreline will have to come from the property owner, because normally the property owner goes out there and they say, oh, they got a bulkhead, I want to do that. And they call the marine contractor and say, I want a bulkhead. And that marine contractor hasn't been to dinner and a movie, so they don't really know about a living shoreline, and they put the bulkhead in. And so I definitely agree that homeowners association should be our next audience, and is a way for us to get to those property owners and expand that knowledge. Something I also want to say is that for me, it's really challenging when I get these requests where people want to build, they come to the training, they want to build a living shoreline, and they want my advice. Well, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a landscape architect. I do training. And so it's really challenging for me, because we don't have a lot of marine contractors out there who are really skilled in living shorelines. We're also a state agency, so we can't really recommend any particular business. We're working really hard to get our field staff trained on living shorelines so that they can be an advocate for living shorelines and can maybe help in some of the design, but there's turnover, and it's hard to keep people up to date on the latest things, as well as be experienced in, what are some tips for what this shoreline could be as a living shoreline. So we have a lot of challenges, and right now when I am getting these requests to help design a living shoreline, I first refer them to their field representative, who can help them with the permitting process. And then right now I'm referring them to the North Carolina Coastal Federation, because they're our best experts out there. They build a lot of these, and they also can, be more of an advocate for a living shoreline than I could in some ways.
Okay, that was great. That's very helpful. Another question, I know you guys have been doing these trainings since 2002. I think that's what you said. So you guys are kind of ahead of the curve. Are any other NEARS sites doing this, like within the NOAA NEARS system? And if not, we have people from all around the country. If people want to nudge their NEAR in the right direction, what do they need to do? I think that most coastal training program coordinators would be receptive to partnerships on training. And certainly if they're not working on living shorelines now, I would think that would be a priority for them, because we're all of the reserves are interested in protecting our estuaries and our nursery areas and ensuring those for future generations. That's really our mission. The Hudson River Reserve in New York, Emily Hauser is their coastal training program coordinator. They've been working for a long time on living shorelines. They've had several grant projects related to living shorelines. I believe the GTM Reserve that is in Florida near St. Augustine, I believe they have a research project on living shorelines right now. And I do believe that some of the Gulf Coast reserves are working on living shorelines. So it is a big topic for us. I think even maybe Padilla Bay out in Washington State has been involved in living shoreline work. I know all the coastal training program coordinators. They're a great group of people. I know they would be receptive to partnership opportunities on trainings regarding living shorelines, because I really do think it fits our mission and our training objectives. Good to know. But to the best, and in that answer, are you guys the only NEAR that's really explicitly doing it in terms of realtors, or are other folks doing it? I think we are in terms of realtors.
I'm not sure of really any other reserves that focus on realtors.
Interesting. For what it's worth, I know there are folks in the Pacific Northwest that are, they have an interesting realtor training program, not associated with the NEAR system. And I think maybe even up into British Columbia, they're starting to do some of that as well, because I mentioned the work that you folks were doing, and they got very excited. So
good.
that other organizations were doing it. Okie dokie. All right, we did get a little quick note. The San Francisco Estuary NEAR is also starting to get involved in living shorelines. They're not doing realtor trainings, but people are very excited to share this webinar with them. So, Whitney,
awesome.
you may be inundated after our local
That's
partners.
Okay. Bring it on.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm happy to help.
That's fantastic. And let's see. The only other question that I had, and this is sort of and I have been feeding some of the other questions that I've been getting from folks as well, sprinkled in with these questions. So this is, like I said, similar to a lesson learned, but what was the most unexpected thing that kind of happened during any of these workshops, like something that came out of left field that really altered your perspective, perhaps on like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. You know, we need to work on X, Y, and Z, or something strange that you would advise people to be prepared for?
I haven't had anything really bizarre. I think with adults, it's just really important to remember that they are coming to a training with already set mental models and already a lot of knowledge. And so it's real important to make sure you're not talking down to them, and make sure you recognize their intelligence, I guess. At one of the dinner and a movies, I didn't really know what to expect, and it was the first one we did. And in hindsight, it would have been really good to have maybe some discussion questions after the movie rather than just expecting people to have questions. Because at one of our events, it was like crickets. Like, really? No questions? But then people started going up to me and other people in the room and having little discussions on their own. And so people were interested, but they were, kind of scared to, I guess, speak out in front of everybody. But I did have one marine contractor who really needed to share his knowledge and share, I wouldn't say opposition to living shorelines, but his problems with living shorelines, and make sure we knew that they weren't, the end all be all. And he was real sort of annoyed that he was in Wilmington area, and so, which is where University of North Carolina Wilmington is, and there's a lot of people down there working on coastal issues and shellfish and things like that. And he was real annoyed that none of those researchers had ever included him in research projects on shoreline stabilization. And he felt like his voice as a specialist in marine construction wasn't being heard. And so I just let him say what he needed to say, and it was fine. It wasn't rude or anything like that. But it did give me, appreciation for these marine contractors know a lot, and they know a lot about conditions on the ground. And so, talking about living shorelines might be a more delicate conversation than just getting up there and telling them what it is, but more of a conversation versus just, hey, this is a living shoreline and we want you to start doing this, but more about, what do you think about this? How could you incorporate this? What do you think about these materials? And things like that. So just something to keep in mind.
I think that's valuable, I think almost regardless of who you're talking to, right? Like making sure keep in mind that, the people you're talking to are reasonably intelligent people, even if they're not perhaps up to speed. And I do know that I know at least the American Literal Society up in New Jersey has adopted also the dinner and a movie concept as well, and they are having some success with reaching out to folks. And they've also found, just as a side note for other people who are interested in this, is that it gives them a really great excuse to reach out to friendly restaurants. So it becomes a bit of a win-win where they reach out to restaurants that are supportive. They develop that relationship. The restaurants get some money, and they usually do it midweek, so it's, they're not going to do it on a Friday night or something.
Right.
And then, the restaurants make some money, they develop that relationship, and they continue to, be able to, have ongoing relationships, and those have often blossomed into other things. Like they turn into sponsors of the 5K or, something like that. And so that, or, they offer their space for free for their next fundraiser or, something like that. So we've heard, and I think ALS has been developing relationships that way. I'm incorporating a bunch of these questions. Another question, so you are a state agency, so presumably your time is funded through the state and through NOAA, whoever, on the public sector side. Do you know of any grants or anything that folks, particularly in the nonprofit and private sectors, could apply for to help support the cost of these sorts of things, right? So, the food costs money, so on and so forth. Do you know of any places that people could look?
Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head, but I don't know about how organizations in Ray may partner with local research institutions, because what I'm finding lately is that these researchers and professors have to incorporate outreach, training, and maybe even like collaborative processes in these grant proposals to be more competitive. And I've gotten approached recently for 4 letters of support to help with trainings and things, and that could be a great partnership and source of funding for programs. I also think for the realtor crowd, if you even charged enough to just cover the cost of the event. So, I mean, at my realtor workshops, I don't provide a meal because they're only 4 hours, but I'll just provide, drinks and snacks, which doesn't cost much if you go to the grocery store, $2, $4 a person. And then if you just pass that cost on to the realtor as like a $10 registration fee, that could help you cover the cost as well. And I don't think a realtor would balk at that for that type of continuing education.
Okay, great. And let's see, one more question, I think, and then we'll start to wrap it up. So most of the communities you've been dealing with are presumably coastal property owners, things like that. Have you given any thought, or have you reached out to typically underserved or underrepresented communities or faith-based communities? Have you seen any interest from those communities in either you reaching out to them or them reaching out to you? And the logic behind it in terms of my question is sometimes those are the communities that are in very vulnerable populations and locations, for sea level rise, and they're sometimes a ground zero for adaptation issues. So I was just curious if there has been any thinking along those lines.
Not specifically. In terms of the faith-based organizations, before I started in my position, the person before me had tried to reach out to churches around town, and I don't think, this was a while ago, that the response was great. And for some of the things we're dealing with, I'm not sure what the angle would be with a faith-based organization. We certainly have a lot of underserved communities in North Carolina. We have a lot of communities that are struggling with Hurricane Matthew recovery, and that are low-lying and prone to flooding. I don't specifically target those communities, but I do try to offer my workshops around the coast, and so not everybody has to come to Beaufort. I try to have things on the Outer Banks or the Inner Banks or down south. But a real connection, no. In my job, I am trying to do more technical assistance, meaning not just a workshop, but working with a partner or a community for a longer period of time. And I could see where that could evolve into some underserved communities that are dealing with climate change resilience issues. But right now I'm working with the town of Beaufort, which is where I live. There's major stormwater issues there. majorly outdated infrastructure. And we are about to complete a watershed restoration plan that'll set us up for Environmental Protection Agency funding, as well as a capital improvement plan to help fix outdated stormwater infrastructure with sort of a low impact development mind frame. But that's really not so much with the underserved or the faith-based at this time.
Fair enough. And then that's always an ongoing challenge, I think, throughout the coastal restoration and management communities, which is how do we increase diversity and increase our inclusion in terms of our outreach and, you know, really trying to make a meaningful impact and engagement. So that, I think, so that's a question that's almost always in the back of my mind when it comes to outreach and education efforts. All righty. So we have, as of right now, we have no more questions or hands raised. So I will give folks one last chance. If you have any questions or want to raise your hand to ask a question of Whitney, please do so now. All right, seeing none, I will thank all of you for attending. And Whitney, and if you want to change your screen back to me, I will let people know how they can reach you. All right. So here we are. Let's see. And if it'll, now my computer is not working. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here we go, folks. So this is how there's Whitney in a less action shot, I guess less of an action shot, perhaps. And there's her information, striking a pose. And there's information on how to reach her. And then there's additional information on Restore America's Estuaries Living Shorelines efforts, along with the Living Shorelines Academy. So with that, Whitney, thank you very much again. That was very helpful. I got a bunch of comments saying, this is so great. This is very helpful. So yeah. So
well, it's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I will hereby end the webinar, and I will let folks know once the webinar is posted so you can share with your partners. So thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.